Hello, I'm Pauline from Pauline's Quilters World, and I'm here today to teach you about free motion quilting on your normal domestic sewing machine. If you're a person that's never ever tried free motion quilting, it can be a challenge. It's not something that's automatically going to happen, it's something we have to really practice, and that's the ultimate word. The more you practice, the quicker you'll learn. I'm just going to take you through some of the things that I use and recommend, and also show you all the different steps that you can take to learn to be really good at free motion quilting. It's like learning to drive a car. When I teach people free motion quilting, I give everybody a nail plate. Learn a driver, because we have to learn to control the speed of the needle and be able to get even stitches, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But when you do a little bit of practice and you get better and better and better, you'll get a P-plate. You'll advance on and you'll start to be able to do all your beautiful shapes like hearts and feathers and stars and things like that. And then when you want to start getting onto quilting quite a big quilt, you'll get your open license. But it's going to take you practice. It's like somebody learning to drive the car. 100 hours of practice, you get better and better. So that's what you need to do with free motion quilting. So now I'm going to show you some of the tools that I like to use and and explain a little bit about why I would use them. To show you a little bit about the feet, if I was going to be doing straight line quilting, I would possibly use the walking foot. Now, a walking foot, this lever comes up, and as it does, as the needle comes up and down, the foot walks the 3 layers through for you. So you get even feed top and bottom. But when we're free motion quilting, even if I was doing these straight lines on a big quilt, I'd want to free motion them. Otherwise, I'm going to be turning the whole quilt through the machine all the time, and it's too difficult. So we use a free motion foot. This is a generic foot. And what most of them look like. We have a little oval at the bottom. That's what's going to sit against the fabric. We have the spring, it's spring loaded, and we have a little arm. The arm goes over the needle holder, and as the needle goes up and down, the foot pivots up and down. It's called a pogo stick, a free motion foot, all different sorts of things. But I find having it closed in at the front doesn't allow me to stitch on a line. If I'm going to trace a design like feathers onto my fabric and want to quilt on that, with that foot closed in, I can't see where I'm going. So that's why I always use and strongly recommend using an open toe foot. This is an open toe free motion foot, still got the spring on it. There is nothing at the front of the foot, so that we can now see any line that we want to stitch. So that's the foot I would recommend, is that one, the open toe foot. The other thing that I find when we're free motion quilting is trying to get your machine at a nice angle. So I always use 2 rubber door wedges under the back of the machine, and I'll show you how to set these up in a moment. So that tilts the machine forward for me so I don't get the pressure on my shoulders. I use the Superior Top Stitch titanium needles because I find quilting a big quilt we can blunt needles very quickly. These needles being titanium coated, they last a lot longer. The point stays sharper for a lot longer, so I'm going to get probably 5 or 6 times longer out of one of these needles to what I do out of a regular needle. I use these for quilting, piecing, applique, everything I do, one needle is what I use. And the nice thing about them is they've got a very big eye, so they're easy to thread. I oil my machine regularly with this oil pen. This is pure machine oil. It's a clear oil, which is great for your machine. Why I use this is it just gives me one little dot of oil where I need it around the bobbin area. All our machines are metal inside, so they need a little bit of oil. And the other thing is, with this oil dropper, I find if we put a little drop of oil on our rotary cutting blade, our blades will stay sharper for so much longer. So I find this a very handy tool. I've been using this for years and I haven't even got halfway through it, so it will last you for a long time. When I mark straight lines onto my quilts, I like to use a hero marker. This is a tool that we use to draw straight lines. It puts a crease in your fabric so you don't have to wash a line out when you're finished, and I'll show you how to use this in a moment. If I had to mark a a design onto my fabric and I need to trace that design on so I can see it clearer, I use the Bohin, the French marking pen. It comes with black and white lead, which allows me to mark any coloured fabric. If I mark with that onto, say, this quilt here, if I want to get rid of the mark, I can erase it out quite easy, and it also washes out of my fabrics so I don't have a mark left where I've quilted over. One of the most important things that I find that is for free motion quilting is the sew slip mat. This is a Teflon mat that has a cutout in here for the feed dogs to be up or down, whichever way you want. Take the brown paper off the back, put that aside. This side that I took the paper off, it's sticky, so it sticks to the surface of the machine. Put this over the feed dogs, where the feed dog area is. You will have your feed dogs down. I like to put this long section at the front, I like to put that over the front of the machine so the quilt slides up and over. Now what that does is when I put my fabric on the machine and I start to quilt, it allows the fabric to slide and glide easy, so I'm not pushing from the shoulders. It's a great tool. One of the things with free motion quilting is because we've got the feed dogs down, we have to keep consistent pressure on the fabric. Now, we usually quilt with our hands stretched out like this, and I find when we do this, we're putting our thumbs forward to give that area in here the equal pressure we need, I find that it puts a lot of pressure on our shoulders. Because when we put our thumbs forward, naturally our elbows go out and our shoulders go up. So what I do is I use the weighted quilting hoop. This is designed specially for free motion quilting. We'll put our fabric over here, put the hoop on the top, put our fingers and thumb either side, keep our elbows tucked in, and we start quilting. But we're going to learn how to use this. If you've got a machine that has a much bigger bed in it, like the throat area of it, you'd be better off investing in the larger hoop. So this is made for the really big machines that are out now for us for quilting. So they would be the recommended tools that I would use. Threads, you can use any sort of thread for free motion quilting, whatever you like, whatever is going to enhance your quilt. I love using variegated threads, but when I've got fabrics where I've got lots of multiple colours, like this quilt over the bench here, I always have the mono poly clear thread in the top and the bobbin. Sometimes I might put a regular thread on the top and the mono poly in the bobbin, or I might vice versa. I might put this in the top of the machine and a regular thread in my bobbin. But we're going to learn how to use all of these through this lesson. But that's just the tools that I like. Oh, I forgot my light. This is a little USB light. It comes with the charger cord. You have Velcros that comes off the back. This section here sticks to your machine. You put the light on the machine, and then when you're wanting to start stitching and you want to stitch in the ditch or do some really decorative quilting, turn the light on and you get a beautiful light right to the needle point. So you can see exactly the ditch where you're going to be stitching. So they're the tools that I love to use. So now let's get the machine set up and let's start quilting. Now I'm just going to talk about the batting I like to use. I just love the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting, but you can use whatever batting or wadding you want to use. But why I use this is I never have to use a safety pin. I just hate pinning quilts, and I find I don't get any movement at all using this batting. It's 80% cotton, 20% polyester. I cut my backing and my batting to whatever size I need to, then lay the quilt top over the top. Then with a hot dry iron, I slowly press. You have to have the iron really hot. You would, on a big quilt, you'd use your big iron. But just keep working over the surface till you get the whole lot done. And you'll notice I'm moving the iron fairly slowly, because if we iron too fast, we don't get enough heat into to make it stick. Once you get the whole top of your quilt done, you would turn the quilt over and you would press the back. Now, if you make a mistake ironing it up, you could peel this off a lot of times and iron it on. I can put the iron on here. Nothing sticks to my iron, so it doesn't make a mess of everything. So I just love using this batting. Now, on a practice sheet, I'd start with some pieces about this size, or whatever you've got as scraps. Any fabrics will do. I'd divide your piece up into sections so you can practice different styles of quilting on this fabric. So if you're going to draw a line, use your ruler and draw, just with your marking pen, like so. But if, as I said, if it was a quilt and you wanted to use your hero marker so you didn't have to get rid of any of the lines, put your ruler down and you run this up and down your fabric, and what it does, it puts a crease in your fabric. So just a nice little crease. If you make a mistake putting that crease in, you can iron the crease out. Just love this tool for doing all sorts of things. As you get more advanced and we start working up, if I wanted to do a feather vine or something, I could use this tool to mark the spine of the feather. And then I got a guideline of how to do my feathers back too. So it's just a handy tool for doing anything. So once we've got our fabric marked up into sections, and I've got a couple of pieces here marked up, we'll now be ready to go and do different practice pieces on all of these. So we're next going to set your machine up. We're going to show you how to sit at your machine properly, and then we'll get started with doing some different designs. Set your machine up with the door wedges. So we've got our 2 door wedges. Just put them underneath the back of the machine so it's sitting nice and level, and you can push them under as far as you want, and you just get these at a hardware store. I just find that when I sit at the machine, that tilts everything to me and I'm not bending over the machine like we usually do. If you use one of the Perspex extension table around your machine, some of those tables have wind-up legs, so you'd wind up the back legs. If you don't have the wind-up legs on an extension table, you would buy 4 rubber door wedges and you put 2 under the back, because you want that extension table to tilt at the same level as what your machine is. The other thing I do to make myself very comfortable at the sewing machine is with my foot pedal to the machine, I don't put this out to the right of my machine and put my right foot on it, because I find if I do that, 2 things happen. One is my needle goes too fast, and I think that's because my right foot's so educated with driving. The other thing is, sewing with our right foot, we tend to twist our spine. So try putting your foot pedal directly under the needle and try stitching with your left foot. And I think once you start doing that, you'll find that you sit at your machine with a much better posture, and also your needle will go at a more controlled speed for you while you're learning to free motion quilt. So now we're really going to get into setting up the machine, putting the sew slip mat on, and we're going to start by teaching you how to stitch a straight line and get your stitches even to start with. Your feed dogs are. Like, there's no problem if you have an extension table. You may prefer to put it this way on your machine, to put out over the extension table. But as I said before, I like the long section to come to the front so that I can have something slippery down here so my quilt slides up and over it. Once you do that, just pull your bobbin thread up through. We've got the free motion foot on, we've got the light on in case I need it, and you know, you can see that it gives me a beautiful bright light. You can just position it wherever you want, right to the needle, so that it gives you a very clear view of what you're doing. We'll turn it off so we can see everything, don't get the glare. So now on my fabric, I've sectioned this up, and this is what I suggest that you do. So draw some straight lines with the marking pencil, with the hero marker, whichever way you'd like to draw them. We're going to now start stitching a straight line. Now it's all about learning to move the fabric under the needle at the right speed. With free motion quilting, it's very hard to get that happening, because if you have your needle going too fast, which means you have your foot on the foot pedal too hard, your needle will go very fast. So if you have your needle going fast and you move your fabric very, very slow, you're going to get very, very small stitches, which eventually will cut through your batting or your wadding. if you have your needle going really slow, so if you've got a cruise control button on your machine and you slow this right down, you can tend to have the needle going too slow and you can push your fabric too fast and then you get big stitches. So I say put your needle speed position, if you have one on your machine, put it on the faster speed. Learn to control your speed through your foot pedal, through your accelerator, just like you're driving a car. Once we get the speed under control and we start to get our lines and our stitches staying all nice and even, and we're going to be sewing towards ourselves, try then stitching backwards up a straight line. And once you get that under control, draw some lines and then we'll try stitching to the left and the right so that we get nice even straight rows and even stitches going left and right. Then we'll start doing some little shapes. But to get started, I have my open toe free motion foot on the machine. I have my foot pedal directly under the needle so my left foot will stay on it. We're going to put the pressure foot down. Now it's very easy to forget to put your pressure foot down when you're free motion quilting. If for some reason you turn your fabric over and you've got bird's nest on the back where all your threads are loose, it usually means that you forgot to put your pressure foot down. When your pressure foot's up, your machine has no tension, your threads will just pull through. When you put your pressure foot down, your machine has a tension and now it's got a lovely tension on the thread. So if you have that bird's nest, you know what's happened. Go back and make sure the pressure foot's down. Now, we're going to start by using this V shape with our fingers. Now, when you put your fingers, your thumbs forward like this, you will notice as you start stitching, your elbows will go out further and your shoulders will start to come up. So just give it a go, but we want to show you then how to use the hoop to get rid of that horrible posture. If you have a needle down position on your machine, press that button so your needle will always stay down in the work. If you don't, I'll show you what to do. So we're going to form a V. You can see my hands, I'm forming a V around the needle. So we've got our thumbs together and our fingers together at the back. Just try stitching about 5 stitches. 3, 4, 5, stop. Reposition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop. Reposition. Now I'll show you if you don't have a needle down position what you would do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop. Keep your left hand on your work and hand wind your needle down. Now if you take your hands off, your fabric's not going to jump to the side. So just keep going. Do a row. This will take you a little time. 5 stitches at a time. This is just helping you learn to move the fabric under the needle. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing with my hands as I stitch. And this is a very slow process and you'll think you'll never get it. You'll never speed up, but very soon you will be speeding up. 4, 5, stop. Now try sewing a little bit faster. And try doing a few more stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now you can start to hear the purr of the machine when you start to get your rhythm going. So we want to come across here. So what we're doing is we're pushing the fabric away from us as we stitch forward. Now on this row we can really start to speed up. And we sew a lot longer. When we get level with our thumbs, stop. Reposition. Now what we're learning to do now is move the fabric under the needle at the right speed to keep those stitches nice and consistent. The stitch length you're aiming for free motion quilting is about the stitch length that your machine defaults to about a 2.5 stitch length. Get up to the top, turn around, come across. Now just keep stitching rows until you start to feel that you've got control. Then start moving your hands out. Start stitching faster. Hear the purr of the machine. Now once your elbow starts, or your wrist, sorry, starts to hit this side of the machine, it's time to stop and reposition. Stop. Now try putting your hands like so and tucking your elbows right in. Move your hands out, because if your thumb is in line with your needle holder, you're going to keep hitting it, and you'll keep wanting to move your finger as you stitch, and if you do that, your stitches will jump to the side. So don't do that. Stitch across, turn around, just keep your thumbs out of the road, and now just keep going. And very soon you'll be starting to feel very confident at the way you're moving the fabric through under the needle. And all of a sudden your stitches will become nice and even. And then very soon you'll be able to do straight lines without even drawing the lines. Oops, I've got a bit of thread caught up there. So now I haven't got a line here, but if we keep our fabric nice and taut. Now as I sew, if I start to move my hands as I'm sewing, you'll see all my stitches have gone very large and they've gone very wonky. That's what it's all about, having consistent pressure. If I use the hoop, the weight of this hoop now gives me consistent pressure. So what I'm going to do is put my thumb and my finger only on the side of the hoop with both hands. Don't sit like this, because you're going to put too much pressure on yourself and the quilt. Relax your posture, thumb and finger, just very lightly. Now that hoop has all the weight that I need. Now, if I happen to be sewing down here and I take one hand off, my stitches are going to become very even. I'm not going to lose that pressure that I do if I shift my hands off the fabric. And just keep going and keep stitching until you get all of those stitches nice and even. And then when you do that, and when you're happy with that, now try stitching backwards. Just go backwards. What we're doing is pulling the fabric towards ourselves while we stitch backwards. Now the hoop is now hitting up against the edge of my foot, so it's time to move the hoop. And I'll turn the fabric around so we stitch backwards again. But if you don't have the hoop, remember you're going to have to keep consistent pressure on the fabric, and you're likely to get that very, very bad posture happening, stitching to the left and the right. When you've got that under control, come down to another piece of fabric and then start stitching in a little maze effect, like come forward, go to the side. Go backwards, come to the side, go backwards, come forward. Just keep stitching around in all directions and learning how to keep your needle at a nice consistent speed. And you can notice my fabric's not moving fast, it's moving nice and gently, it's not jerking, I haven't got any pressure on my shoulders or neck. If I decide to take one hand off, my stitches still stay even. And I would suggest you try stitching with your left hand and sewing with your left foot. You'll be surprised how easy it is. Just keep going. You might try to do a bigger square. So pretend you're stitching around a block now. Now pretend you're going across in the ditch. Now you want to do some triangles. So you can see by teaching yourself all of these straight lines how you can stitch all the way around a quilt and you don't have to turn the quilt. So much easier than using a walking foot. So you can do any shape you want, just keeping that needle nice and consistent speed. You know, and of course if you're going to go flat out, you've got to move your fabric very fast to stitch with that. So that's why I say, as a learner, just go at your speed so you can control the shape that you're doing. And I find the hoop so much better than trying to sit over my machine like this, because as I'm stitching, I'm going to keep wanting to move my fingers, and as I do, all those stitches will go very uneven. So the hoop allows you to sit at a much better posture. So now let's come down and let's now try stitching a circle, about a 20-cent piece size, or the size of a coin. Now, sometimes you'll stitch better to the left or anti-clockwise. Sometimes you'll stitch better to the right. You've got to work out which way you stitch best, which is the easiest for you. And just keep going and stitching circles. Don't try really tiny circles. I find a lot of beginners, when they're trying to free motion quilt, they do their shapes way too small. So if I'm going to do a small circle, it's very hard to get around that circle to start with when you're learning. So practice with bigger shapes. Practice speeding up, and you'll find your fabric will glide so much easier for you when you're sewing a little bit faster. Then once you've got that done, you might do some smaller shapes, coming in and out of a shape. Just learn to keep your speed consistent. Learn to stitch back over a shape. It's very good practice, stitching over shapes that you've already done. And what it's doing is teaching you control. But if you have to sew this slow, sew that slow till you get a little bit more confident, and then start speeding up. There's no speed to quilt at, I believe. It's whatever speed you can control, your shape and your stitch length. So just try practicing all different curve shapes. Use up the whole piece of your training fabric. And it's a good idea to write a date on this, because every time you practice, you should be getting a little bit better. So if you date your work, it's much easier. So once you do that, you can move on to other shapes, like learn to stipple. Now, stippling's a hard thing to do. You're better off drawing on paper till you get the idea of how a shape works first. So it's just manoeuvring around. Stippling is not meant to cross over a line. That's the real stippling. But if for some reason or other you start to cross over a line, you just automatically call that meandering. But meandering's just lovely to do, because you can come in and out of your curves, do little loops, do like a bit of a stipple shape, come back and do a curve. The shapes happening, different sizes. So with this, I've now got my machine with no thread in it. Have your needle in the down position. Don't forget to put that pressure foot down. Make sure that's down. Put your needle in the down position. Use your hoop. Now you could practice with threads, but it's just going to waste a lot of your threads, and it's just, you know, I just think it's silly to waste with threads. What we're going to try to do is develop muscle memory. You know how we've all learnt to write over the years? We can write any word we want without thinking about it. All of your shapes for quilting can be done the same way, just developing a muscle memory. So just by stitching over these lines, you're starting to develop a muscle memory, and you're learning to stitch on a line. And it's great if you can stitch a lot of these shapes without ever having to draw them, because if you've got a big quilt and you've got to go through and draw 50 feathers onto it, it's going to be hard. Now I'm going to come around these feather shapes. And just by stitching around a shape like this, you get to feel how that shape works. Go round, maybe try going backwards around that shape. And it's all about learning that shape, or if you do draw it onto a quilt, it's learning how to stitch on a line and get your stitches nice and even. And this could be your practice piece forever. You might just keep practicing over this for a long time until you learn how those shapes work. And you know, you'll start to feel so proud of yourself when you start to get this happening. And there is that moment when all of a sudden it locks in and you think, wow, I know how that shape works now. And then if you find that you feel that you know how the shape works and which way you're going to stitch it, go to another practice piece of fabric like we were using before and try and stitch these shapes without drawing them on. But can you hear how I've got my machine going at a nice even pace? Now I'm going to stop. I'm going to move the hoop. Now I'm going to stitch around the heart. And you might want to stitch around this heart 30 or 40 times. Now I just want to show you these, this pattern here. I call it teardrops, and you can see we've started with a little tiny teardrop and then we echo around those teardrops. And we just keep meandering around till we get the whole piece of fabric stitched up. But don't you love the variegated threads? And that's why I encourage you to try any threads. As you start to advance on with your quilting, just experiment with different threads, different weights. We're going to teach you how to tension your machine so you don't have any of those tension issues. But if you want to teach yourself a shape like this, just start with a piece of paper. I've just got a blank piece of paper here and I'll do it at my machine. Start drawing like a teardrop and then echo around